one thing I learned in studying ancient wisdom is that almost every ancient society that had writing, that had people reflective, people had accumulated a great deal of insight into how their minds worked and how social relationships worked. There's a lot of wisdom there. So the ancients were just terrible at thinking about biology and chemistry and physics. In terms of the wisdom of the ancients for the natural sciences, throw it out. There's really not much to draw from there. But they were very keen observers of themselves, their minds, and their relationships. Now, part of what's happening here, part of the reason they seem so wise, is that there's a filtering mechanism going on where they wrote a lot of things, and the works, the tracts, the quotes that resonated with people throughout the ages, those are the ones that got preserved. So it's not clear that the ancients were any wiser than we were about psychology. I'd imagine on average they were not. But history has distilled their best ideas for us, and boy, there's a lot to be learned from reading those ancient texts.
Yes, absolutely. One question that really interests me in terms of understanding kind of the psychological connection or the psychological state of wisdom, and understanding that, is wisdom a kind of cognitive illusion in the way that, we see, two, parallel lines together, and, it distinguishes us, or we can't distinguish them. Is it an unattainable ideal in our modern world, or is it something that is a necessary illusion?
I don't think that wisdom is a feeling. I think our minds are pattern matchers. We are very, very good at seeing one situation and mapping it onto another and drawing lessons from one to the other. And that takes a lot of experience. It takes many years of experience. And so I think people get better and better as they get more life experience. As they get more patterns in their mind, as they get more adept at matching things up, I don't think there's so much a feeling of, oh, now I'm wise. It's more just that you begin to handle life situations better than you did before. Just like when you're playing chess, at first you're a novice, and after a while you see higher level patterns, you become more expert. You don't walk around saying, ooh, I feel like an expert in chess, but you enjoy thinking about it more. When faced with a chess problem, you can handle it better. That's the way I think about wisdom.
Very interesting. How do you see social media's role and our, in enabling or maybe dissembling of our, maybe not feeling of wisdom, but experience of wisdom?
That's a good question. Let's see. Social media. I think social media is having many effects. It's linking people together in ways that they've never been linked before, and in many ways it's much, much broader and shallower. That might be okay. That might actually be better than just having a few connections that are deeper. We don't know yet. Another effect is that it very efficiently gets us to the news reports, the stories, the quotations that are best for us. If you don't read the newspaper, well, the most important stories for you, somebody's going to tell you about. So from an informational perspective, it may be beneficial in some ways. On the other hand, it can lock us into groups that tend to just circulate things that are congenial to that group's perspectives. Not that it was that much different 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago. So I think we don't really know what effects. All we can say for sure is that it's linking us. It's bathing us in links, dozens or hundreds or thousands a day, which I think has generally positive potential.
Interesting. How does group dynamics, competition among businesses, competition, among individuals, inform human wisdom? Does competition make us wiser?
Competition is one of the most basic aspects of evolution. Of course, anybody who studies evolution knows that it's about competition among individuals, and ultimately competition among alleles, among genes. So we're very used to thinking about evolution in that way. For humans, though, I think that evolution has been very much about competition between groups. That's why we are so good at forming groups. We form businesses, we form teams, we form fraternities, we form all kinds of social clubs. So a lot of my research on morality is about this groupish nature, our tribal minds. One of the basic principles of moral psychology is morality binds and blinds. So when you participate in a group, especially a group that's competing with other groups, that tends to bind you together, makes you much more effective, but by necessity it makes you less wise. To the extent that you are tightly bound into a group, you cannot think for yourself. You cannot integrate conflicting pieces of data, conflicting evidence. So I think our groupishness makes us less wise, and a lot of the great ancient wisdom of the East is very much about the importance of stepping out, stop judging. The world is an illusion, the battles, the passions, the intensity is all an illusion. So I think groups make us much more effective and less wise.
You began your book, Happiness Hypothesis, by kind of talking about the ubiquity of wisdom and maybe the commodification of wisdom into sound bites. How do you see the value, or being able to translate the value of some of these kind of core insights, beyond the soundbite, beyond the kind of, link baiting?
Right. So the foundational truth of psychology, what's chapter 1 of the happiness hypothesis, is that the mind is divided into parts that sometimes conflict. And many societies, many civilizations have seen that as a conflict between the kind of the more rational or reasoning part and the more animal or visceral or emotional part. And in the happiness hypothesis, I used the metaphor that the mind is divided like a rider, which is the rational process. He's on an elephant, which is much, much larger, also really smart. I mean, I picked an elephant rather than a horse because elephants are bigger and smarter and very sociable. So if you think about it that way, then you see all this wisdom coming at us in the form of quotations and various links to articles. That's all aimed at the rider only. It has no effect on the elephant. So we're exposed to more wise ideas, but wisdom resides in a well-trained, well-tuned-up elephant who's developed lots of patterns, lots of expertise that's often unconscious. So I think our easy exposure to knowledge does not foster wisdom directly at all. But as you go on through life, as you have life experiences, when you get as the elephant gets wiser, if you get ideas matching up between elephant and rider, then you can get more of an aha experience. You can understand what you've learned. But you have to experience and do it to learn it. You can't just read it.
Right. That's your happiness comes from in between, and which I found very useful actually as a metaphor. One question I was thinking about was the things that lead to human happiness seemed like in order to get there to get to that in between point where you're not necessarily searching for external things or looking for resolution from within, is in itself a form of wisdom. You have this kind of innate understanding of your contextual environment. So is wisdom itself a precondition for human happiness? Or?
Is wisdom a precondition for human happiness? I would have to say no, because happiness, if happiness comes from between, if it comes from getting the right relationship between yourself and others, yourself and your work, yourself and something larger than yourself, then it's about the conditions of your embeddedness in the world. And I think a person who achieves that is going to be at the top of their range, whether or not they are wise. Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. And that's a nice motto for academics and for people who are very cerebral. But I think you could just as well say the unlived life is not worth examining. If given the choice between being properly embedded or being wise in the sense of having events happen inside you that give you all this perspective, I think a person who's properly embedded will be on average happier than a person who is wise. Wisdom has what economists call positive externalities. Having wise people around will lead to good advice, moderation. You want to live in a world with many wise people in it, certainly at the helm of government. But I don't think that there's much evidence that wisdom will make you happier in and of itself.